Welcome everybody. Today we are here to talk about how we can understand Civil 3D templates for survey processing. And then we're also going to do a little bit of magic with our CIM Project Suite to use that to enhance some of our survey processing workflows. My name is Kyle Groves. I am an EIT and a Senior Technical Specialist with ATG, coming at you from Minnesota today. And what we're here to talk about on our agenda, pretty quick in the PowerPoint, want to get into Civil as quickly as possible, but why are we using Civil 3D to process our surveys? There are plenty of other solutions out there. There's Carlson, there's BricsCAD, there's EaglePoint, and some of these other tools, but why Civil 3D for processing our data? Well, first of all, Civil 3D is where we're going to be doing a lot of our design work. So if we can keep the data in the same format that our design information is going to be is used to working with and is clean and easy to work with, might as well do it in Civil 3D. The other reason why it's a good idea to do this in Civil 3D is because once we have our settings properly configured, the bulk of this webinar, Civil 3D does two really awesome things for us. One, it makes sure that everything that comes in for the points gets put on the correct layer, which is really important for all of our plotting, visualization, and our just general well-being for our drawing. Layers matter, and having things get put together there automatically is always a bonus. But the other thing that it's going to do is it's going to draw our line work for us automatically. So no more having to go back through and drawing a feature line or, heaven forbid, a 3D polyline to manually go back and connect all of that information back together. So that's why we're looking at this workflow inside Civil 3D. Some of the things that I'm going to go over for how our survey template and our survey settings, the places where we want to look, obviously 30 minutes is not going to be an exhaustive training on all of this, but I'll show you all the big pieces and where they live. We're going to be looking at our survey description key set. This is going to manage our points. So when we import the points, if the parameters from our point file match the parameters of our Civil 3D template, good things will happen. From there, we've got our figure prefix database. From that list of points that get recognized on import, which one of these are going to be used and connected by that automatic line? So we're going to be creating survey figures, and those codes are all prefixes, and that's why we get that name out of that. We're also going to talk about the linework code set. So this doesn't care whether or not you're drawing a curb line or a concrete edge or a storm drain, but this does inform Civil 3D when it needs to begin line work, end line work, draw curves, what kind of curve is it going to draw, so on and so forth. And the last thing that we're going to talk about is the Civil 3D point group. And this is more about helping us stay organized and go through processing workflows, but I'll show you a really neat thing that you can put into your template to make your existing surface easy as a breeze. Once we go through all those basics, I will touch on some of the ways in which the CIM Project Suite from our collaborating company CTC Software can be used to help you with these workflow and make things go a little bit faster. We've got the tool Survey Sweeper, which is the delete button that you always wanted for your survey figures and survey points, as well as we're going to talk about point file converter, which is going to help make sure that we've always got the right standards coming into Civil 3D when we do that import information. So without further ado, let's get into the software. All right, so I'm just going to start out by opening up a brand new file, and I'm going to open it from my survey template for a variety of reasons, but mostly for the fact that I've already got all these standards set up. So I'm not going to go through as much of the creating of these standards as just helping connect the dots between where they all live. So first thing that I need to do is I actually need to, for all this auto magic to happen, I need to use the survey database functionality out of Civil 3D. So I'm going to be looking at my home tab. I'll have my tool space turned on, and then I'll need to make sure that the survey button is blue and checked so that I get the tab down here in my prospector. Once I navigate over there, just like when I'm working with my Civil 3D data shortcuts, I need to set my working folder. Says, hey, where is this project? And today that's going to be in my little webinar project folder. And then from there, I can create a new local survey database. So in this, I'm going to just create a name for that. I always like to stick SDB at the front for survey database. And then I also like to include my project number. That's because if I ever have to go back and search for these later, I want to make it really easy to find exactly what it is I'm looking for. Once we get that survey database created, and again, this is mostly quick and dirty, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go find my import event, and I'm going to import that survey data. So I'm already using my same survey database. If there are multiple in that working location, here's your opportunity to set that. Inside your survey database, you can do things like define your units, and you can also define a coordinate system. Since this is going to be a pretty simple presentation, I don't have a coordinate system set for either my database or my DWG, but that is where you would accomplish that info. Next up, we need a data source. So this is going to be our point file. I am not going to go through the process of creating a survey network. I've been in the channel for 2.5 years. I haven't come across a firm using survey networks inside Civil 3D. Point files are simple, they're easy, and everybody's using them. And it's really easy to get them out of your data collector too. I'm just going to look for all of my files here, and I want my gas station alpha code set. We'll get through those other CSV files in the later half of the presentation. And then a point file format. So this is just saying, what does the column mean inside my point file? So in this case, I'm going with point number, northing, easting, elevation, description. And I've also got some extra fields created for measure downs and some fun stuff with my invert labeling. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna confirm that, skipping the network option, and then a few other things. So one of the great properties of the survey database is it does that line work processing for us. So I'm going to make sure that that box is checked. And I do want it to not only create this information, but also put it inside my drawing. So I do want to insert those figure objects, and I do want to insert those survey points. When I say finish, I'm going to see my little gas gauges going off. I'm going to zoom to that part of my drawing. And now I've got all kinds of pretty colors and good blocks, and I've even got some of that line work. So this all came together because I have these settings put together between my survey template, my DWT file that I'm starting, as well as some of these other survey settings that might live outside of my DWT, but we're still interested in taking a look at those. So the first and most important part here is the layering and the treatment of my points. So this CSV file that I had as part of my project, what that was simply an export out of my data collector. I'm running around, I'm taking shots, I'm taking data, and I'm writing down what it is I found. So I found a back curve, I found a center line, I found a edge of concrete, a ground shot, all that other stuff. Civil 3D is going to recognize that. But if all I have are points, then I need to make sure that my points are getting modified correctly. So the first place that we're going to go on a tour is through our template settings, and this would be in your DWT. Don't do stuff in your template as far as creating objects, creating Civil 3D Smart objects, the rest of that stuff. We want to keep that to a minimum because our templates always remember, the more stuff we create and delete, the more information we're giving our template that it just doesn't need. But to go through this, we would be looking at our tool space, settings tab, and we are under points and description key sets. The NCS template does have a very simple one put together. This is a really big PITA for getting done, but that is what a lot of tools in our CTC CIM Manager Suite are for. We'll have to talk about those in a different webinar though, because today is just about illustrating the points. So what I have is a whole bunch of codes. So when I begin, or when I get out there and I take an SDM, that means something. When I take a TRC or a TRD, that means something too. And these are our trees. And the special thing about these trees is that yes, I have a certain Civil 3D style that's referencing a block, but I also have the opportunity to scale my tree based off part of that description that I found in my CSV file. So because somewhere when I collected that data point about that tree, I said this had a 13-inch diameter, that's being connected through my description key and through the scale parameter and my scale parameter about what I want that factor to be, and it's increasing the size of that based off of my object. So I can see when I come and I look at this TRC or tree coniferous, this 16-inch is a completely different size visually on my screen than that 8-inch. So our description key set's doing a couple of things, but it's saying when I import points and I recognize a particular code, start doing some work. So we've got a Civil 3D point style. For GGV, we're just looking in here, we've got a marker and we've got a custom AutoCAD block for that. So I've defined that as part of my company standards, and I'm just mapping that through this point style and then through the description key set. Next up, I've got point label styles. Again, just going through and saying, what do I want to see when I bring this in? And for gas valves, I don't need anything. I just need the symbol. But for a PI, maybe I want more info, the number, the elevation, the description. And unless you're scaling your blocks, everything to the right of this really doesn't mean a whole lot. And that's pretty much what we're looking for. We're saying, what is my point code? How do I want it to look visually for the actual marker? And how do I want the label to look? And then we're also assigning our layers. So everything that's just getting a basic X style is going to go on a node layer in this template. Everything that I want to plot is going to have a symbol inside that notch. So our description key set is why I have all these nice pretty colors, and when I hit print, it's going to look the way that my firm needs it to look. Next up though, let's talk about this automatic line work. So when I come over here, I'm noticing that I've got a lot of different pieces of lines. I've got some curb, I've got some concrete, a building outline, some pedestals, all that jazz. Well, how we get that to happen is kind of buried in, is distributed through two separate settings. So we're now going to go back to our survey tab of our tool space, and we're going to look first at our figure prefix database. So in order for us to draw lines between different point codes, we need to first make sure that those are in our description key set. And then second, we need to go through and we now need to populate this prefix database. So every time I have an edge of concrete, EOC, every time I have one of those shots, I want to be able to turn this into a line. So if I look at my figure prefix database in this setup, I'll notice that the EOC indeed is a line. And so because of some other settings, I am allowed to have Civil 3D just connect point 292 to 293 and so on until I get to point 297, and then it'll close itself back up again. And it's not just about saying, yeah, I'd like to draw a line, that'd be cool. But we also have even more info. Just like our survey description key set, we get layer assignment out of here. So if I close out of that and I select this figure, notice how it's automatically on the layer V line concrete. Well, that's because my prefix database tells me so. My EOC code is getting inserted on the AutoCAD layer V-line conc. But there's even more cool stuff in here, because you can say, look, edge of concrete, that's important for my existing surface, but I don't need any buried utilities being added to my surface as break lines. So you get to say whether or not you want this particular figure to be creating break lines in your surface for you in a couple of clicks, or if you want to treat it as a lot line for your parcel workflows. And then that'll make that a lot easier too. So those are the highlights of the figure prefix database and how those impact our drawing and our settings. And unless we have that in the prefix database, we're not going to get lines to connect, even if we're using the linework code set. The linework code set is what really allows these things to get drawn the way that we hope them to and expect them to. So when I have all of these curves going around my curb, that's because of the linework code set. When I come over here to my pedestals, actually, I got an entire pedestal with an L shape only based out of 2 shots. That's because of the linework code set. And what this does is this is giving Civil 3D information on how to treat data. So when I took shot 461 over here, I have an ELB, that's just my observation code that I'm putting into my data collector. But then before I leave, I press space, because I'm delimiting my comments that way based on this information. And then I'm pressing B, capital B. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means I'm going to begin a line. Okay, pretty cool. But what about this other stuff? I see ELB space, now RT. Well, an RT means take a right turn. So as I'm moving from 61 to 62, now I'm going to kick off to the right. And I'm going to go 8 feet. I'm going to take another right turn after 5 and another right turn after 2. And then the rect, REC command, that says finish out whatever I'm doing and make a rectangle. So we've got all kinds of stuff that we can do with this. We've got curve codes. So I can come over here and I can say point that one's a little dense for me. Point 190. As I'm coming to the south, and so on and so forth, I'm saying PC, begin a curve. And I can go through and I can have 191, okay, whatever, that's on a curve. And then over here on point 192, it's just automatically drawing a 3-point curve based off of the rules of those curve parameters. We've also got other things where you can say just, you know, if I have more than 5 curve or more than a 3-point curve, you can begin a curve, pop down a whole bunch of other ones. And then when you use this end curve code, in my case, it's PT. These can be whatever you want. PC for point of curvature, PT for point of tangency. But based off of these linework code set entries, you use your data collector in the way this linework code set is being put together. And now your data collector is telling Civil 3D how these are supposed to be drawn in the first place once they get into Civil 3D. So that's how we get all of these figures. We have begin codes. So BC1 begin this curb line set to BC. And we can even do stuff like horizontal offsets. If I were to take these survey figures and bring them into my object viewer, and zoom in real close to the right spot, I would notice that these are actually all kind of offset. And what they form a shape of is something like a barrier style curb with all of my major breakpoints modified. Well, I don't have to shoot all 4 lines of a brand new shiny curb if I know it's going to be the same geometry. So from this start point, I go over a little bit, down a little bit, over some more, down some more, and over a lot and down a lot. And with all those, I take one shot and it's going to create multiple pieces of line work for me. So that's the advantage of using these settings and putting them all together. Once you've gone through and you've got all those settings set up and you import your data and everything looks good, there's a couple of other ways that we can modify these different pieces of line work. So for example, if I look at this concrete pad between points 292 and 297, I can actually see that point 295 looks like it should be part of that. But due to some fat fingering in my data collector, the wrong point code was used. Now it's EOCC. So what I can do with my survey database open for editing is I can select my survey point, right click, and go to edit the survey point properties. And this is where I can go through and say, there's no second C, it's just EOC. I say okay. And now as soon as I can go through, I can do as many of those at a time as I want. And when I'm done, it's going to ask me if I want to update the line work. It's going to go through and reread everything. Sure, that sounds like a great idea. Going through, and it's rereading that point file and it's rereading your survey database as it was written. But now what it should be doing is it's going from 294 due south to 295 and then due west to 296. So through a survey point edit, I've gone through and I've made that happen. Over here though, we've run into a situation that there's no point edits that we get to do to make this work. So what we're doing is we're coming north and we attempted to do some auto curve work over here. except the surveyor went and shot too far ahead and then came back and fixed some other things. And it's really important because the CSV file is going to be read from top to bottom and or in your point number. And so in this case, we have to do what's called a survey figure edit. So again, my survey database is open. I'm going to right click, select my survey figure. I'm going to update that survey data, or I'm sorry, I'm going to edit my survey figure properties. And I already went through and prepped this. So the problem here is that point 381 is being read in the wrong order. And I can do all kinds of stuff. I can change whether it's a curve or a point or a reverse curve. I'm just going to change the order that this is being read in. And as I do that, we can see all of my blue lines telling me, you know, what my preview looks like is. And when I switch the order from 375, 82, 83, 81, now that preview looks okay. I say okay. It makes that change in the drawing and things have been fixed. But there's a problem. If you do a survey figure edit and then you reprocess your line work after that, what's going to happen is that same bad survey figure is going to get regenerated. It's going to dig itself back out of the grave, and you're going to get zombie data trundling its way through your project, making everything look terrible. So now what we have to do is we have to delete it. And what I'm going to do for that is normally I'd have to go through, I'd have to edit my survey figure properties, I'd have to give it a new name, ZEOC, I'd have to go find it in my survey figure list under my database. And here I can delete it from my database, and then I can delete it from my drawing, and then it's gone. But that's a lot of work. And I don't want to have to do that for every survey point or every survey figure that I want to delete out of my survey database. I just want to select the stuff that I'm trying to get rid of and get rid of it. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to use the CTC CIM Project Suite's free tool, Survey Sweeper. Anybody can go download these tools and use this tool for forever. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this bad survey figure, and I'm going to press OK. And then it's going to say, do you want to delete that one survey figure? And I'll say, yeah, I do. And now, if I go back into my survey figure list, I'm not going to see that survey figure anymore because it deleted it out of my survey database and out of my drawing at the exact same time. So we can do that for both survey points and survey figures. And again, if you do a survey figure edit and reprocess your line work, you're going to get that zombie data every time, because how it's drawing those figures is by reading the points in the point order, and there's no way to point edit your codes to switch that up. So that is a very brief overview of our description keys of our description keys, which are found under the settings point description key sets. And we've also looked at our survey settings for our figure prefix database and our line work code sets. You would find and modify those and the locations that you're looking at for that in your tool space survey tab. This button on the left right here is our survey user settings. You'd go through and you'd identify the file path for those settings, and then you can choose which one of those you want to use as stock. So that's why I've got the CTC figure prefix database being chosen as opposed to the demo or the FPDD. The other tool that I want to talk about here is, I already went through this. I sent my own field crew out. They had the code list. They knew how to begin their lines and end their lines and close their lines, and everything looked great. But I've got this other firm that I work with a lot, and they don't use the same codes as I do. Maybe they're just over the county line and they've got a different regulatory body, maybe whatever, but they're using different codes than me. If I were to attempt to create a new drawing and import their codes, it's not going to look right because my Civil 3D settings aren't set up to read all that. And I'll just do this one simply from the insert points from file command in my ribbon. I'll go choose this wrong set of standards, the numeric standards. I'll import it into my drawing. And I can see that I have COGO points, but none of them are on the right layer, and I don't have any line work being created for me automatically. Also, I'm not using the survey database. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to call on another tool from the CIM Project Suite, and this is the tool called Point File Converter. And what Point File Converter does is it's basically an intelligent find and replace that goes and crawls its way through your survey files. So what you're going to do is you're going to go find the file that doesn't look the way that we want it to. In this case, that would be my numeric standards for that survey. And what I want to do is I want to find a translation file and set that up. And we've got a sample one when you download the tools to do that. And it's going to kind of walk you through. But basically, you've got your old codes, you've got your new codes, and some different other things like maybe your data collector, you wanted to use a period or a dash instead of a space. But you're going to go through, you're going to set up all of these things and get a one-to-one mapping so that what used to be a STMH, a storm water manhole, now we're going to call that a DMH, or a catch basin is going to be a DCB, whatever. And I'm going to open up my translation file that I already have put here. So this is my numeric codes. These are the ones that are right there in the drawing now. And I'm translating them to my alphabetical codes, the ones we were looking at the beginning of the presentation. Again, different suffixes, different delimiters, different comment cards, and we're going to run our way all the way down through the list. So what I'm going to do now is I found the file that I'm starting with. I've said what I'm going to use to translate it, and I'm going to save it in my same project file, and I'm just going to add in a new code. So as soon as I hit apply, it's going to run through. It's going to do all that finding and replacing for me in Excel. Saved it in the wrong location. Just a second. I'm just going to run that again. And put it in my correct project folder this time. Do not like this interface for the searching. I'm going to convert my numeric using that translation file. There we go. And here's my converted file. And I can see that my description field is being populated fully with all of those alphabetical things. And if I went through and I set up my translation file correctly, I should be able to import those points again. And again, I'm just using the basic command. This isn't the survey database, so we don't expect any line work out of this, purely for information purposes. To insert these duplicate point numbers, I'll add an offset because we can only have one point number and an adjacent thing. And I can see now that all my pretty colors are on top of and matching all of those ones from the wrong survey standard. So this is a good way that you can check yourself to make sure that things are coming in correctly. So Point File Converter is really great when you're working with another firm who has different standards than yours, but you still want to be able to share the survey CSV files and that output information, but you don't need to share all of your Civil 3D template info. You don't have to give your survey field crews a different code list, and then they accidentally forget that a ground shot is a GS for you, or it's an SG for some other firm, and then now the things just aren't going to work quite right. So that concludes our Civil 3D presentation. Let's head back into our PowerPoint to review what we learned today. So properly developed Civil 3D standards can save us significant time in processing surveys. The site that we were just looking at was a gas station. We'd also gotten 2 directions of roadway, or bidirectional roadways for 2 sides adjacent to that site. So that was a big survey. You know, doing that might have taken a full day to go out and shoot in the field, but in the office, processing that survey might take us an hour. Whereas if you're just going out and collecting points and then taking those points and drawing your own line work and manually assigning them all to the right layer and doing the rest of that stuff, you're going to be going through a lot more effort in the office. So yes, it does take a little bit more time, maybe an extra 30 minutes all in for going out and shooting that site in the first place. But you're gonna save all of that time and so much more on the processing half once you get it back into Civil 3D. The way that we're doing that is we're getting our automatic layer assignment that's being handled by our description key set, and it's also being handled by our figure prefix database. Our automatic line work is gonna be handled again by that line work code set and by our figure prefix database. And I didn't quite get into this inside the drawings, but the other really important reason why we're letting these codes close for us, so there is a close code in the line work code set. I don't want to copy, I want to edit it. That says, hey, just take me back to the first shot, take me back to the start of this, And that's right here in that concrete line we're shooting at. So we started at 292, we started with a B code, and our last shot 297, we use that close code, it just connects right there. So we don't even have to come back in here and fumble around with our data collector and be off by 200ths or even a full tenth when we come back and try and guess where we started at. So using these codes is also going to give us better closure when we're shooting figures that we know are closed in the field. And secondly, the CIM Project Suite enables us to give even more productivity and project flexibility. That survey sweeper tool is going to give us the delete button that we always wanted. And then that point file converter tool is going to tee up the correct Civil 3D standards to process that survey more effectively if we're going to be working with other firms. And this one, you can go through and do a manual find and replace for like a 1 or 2 time thing, but point file converter is really great if you know that the other firm that you're going to be working with and you're going to be continually translating standards between the two. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for your time today. And I'd like to open us up to questions if anyone has them. If you do come up with something that you wanted to learn more about, feel free to send me an email. It is down there at the bottom of the screen, kgroves@atgusa.com. And have a great rest of your evening, folks. And wash your hands, stay safe, stay healthy. Have a great day.